It's Halloween month, and that means I'm going to be playing a lot of Ghost, Dark, Poison, Bug, and Fossil Pokemon. For a long time in Pokemon Yellow, I have been thinking about doing backports for all of the regional forms of Cantonian Pokemon. So today I'm going to start this project by playing Alolan Marowak. These are the rules for the solo challenge. Alolan Marowak is a fire ghost type Pokemon, and this is obviously a reference to the fact that Marowak was the ghost in Pokemon Tower in Generation 1. It has the exact same base stats when compared with regular Marowak. 60 HP, 80 attack, 110 defense, 45 speed, and I chose to go with its lower special attack as its special, as was the case for original Marowak. I felt it was only consistent to mirror the stats exactly since these Pokemon do share the exact same stats in later generations. Its critical hit rate is 8.59%, not very good just because of its low base speed. Just like Marowak, it has a medium fast growth rate. One of the really fun creative challenges when doing these backports is assigning a Pokemon moves. The levels that it learns new moves at are directly ported over from Marowak in Generation 1, and I also gave it the exact same number of moves that Marowak gets in these games. Marowak starts with 2 moves, Bone Club and Tail Whip, but I switched that up for Alolan Marowak, giving it Ember in addition so that it has a fire type move. This approach mirrors what's happening in Generation 7. Alolan Marowak and regular Marowak learn moves at the same levels, but Alolan Marowak starts with Flame Wheel, whereas regular Marowak has Headbutt. Both of them learn Leer at level 13. I replaced this with Tail Whip. They're essentially the same move. It doesn't really matter. They also learn Tail Whip, but it's a level 1 move, so I just kind of displaced that into the later level up set. As a replacement for Hex, which Alolan Marowak gets at level 17, I have given it the Generation 1 ghost move Nightshade, one of 3 ghost moves in the game, but I've also added a new ghost move, which is Alolan Marowak's signature move, Shadow Bone, which it's going to learn at level 25, the closest level to 27, which is when it gets it in Generation 7. Thrash at level 33 can be consistent between all of the games. I've given it Dig at level 41 as a replacement to Stomping Tantrum. It felt very wrong for me to have a Marowak that doesn't learn Bone Meringue, so it gets it at level 48. Alolan Marowak does learn this earlier on at level 21, but Bone Meringue never gets used in these solo challenges anyway. Churro is lamenting that fact since this is one of the cooler moves in the game, but it's just useless. Finally, at level 55, I've given it Fire Blast as a replacement for Flare Blitz. If you just take a quick glance at Alolan Marowak's TM and HM learn set in comparison to regular Marowak's from Generation 7, you'll notice one key difference, and that's the fact that Alolan Marowak learns electric type moves in the form of Thunderbolt and Thunder, whereas regular Marowak doesn't. If we bring in the Generation 1 TM and HM learn set to compare, you'll also notice one omission, which is the fact that regular Marowak does not learn Rock Slide, whereas both of the later generation Marowaks do learn rock type moves. I felt like since I was backporting a Pokemon, I should maybe give it some of the unique spice from the later generations, so I decided to add Rock Slide to its pool in addition to the electric type moves. I also brought back Swords Dance from Generation 7 because this is a move that I was so sad to learn that Marowak did not get in Generation 1. Sandslash has it, making it by far the superior ground type, so I decided to bring it back and give it to Alolan Marowak today, just to give some differentiation between the Generation 1 Marowak and this version. Alright, let's talk about how this thing plays in the early game, and the answer is really well because it's a ghost type. It is typically the case that most enemy Pokemon can't hit ghost types in the early sections of the main series games. I guess this is a little bit different once Gust becomes a flying type move, but then they just remove it from Pidgey's set starting in Generation 2 so that Pidgey only has Tackle anyway. So defensively, Alolan Marowak is incredible in this section. However, offensively, it's not that good. It's going to be slower than Brock's Onix, which poses a significant threat because Bide will hit ghost type Pokemon in Generation 1. I know that Bone Club isn't going to be doing a lot of damage to Onix, and I figured that Bide was a significant threat. So I decided to do some quick training in the forest against the bug catchers. And this is very fast for Marowak because Ember can make short work of all of these Pokemon. By the time I arrive in the Pewter City Gym, I'm level 9 and close to level 10, and I figured this was enough to take on Brock, even though I'm not going to outspeed Onix. But I think type effectiveness should be enough for me here, as long as the Onix doesn't go for Bide on turn 1. Geodude is first. I go for Bone Club, do more than half because I get a lucky critical hit. Geodude just whiffs a tackle because that's its only move, and then I knock it out. Well, after missing a little bit with Bone Club because this move is tragically inaccurate. Why did they make all of the cool and unique moves less useful than the generic moves like Dig and Earthquake? I feel like Bone Club and Bone Meringue both should be the more accurate moves that give the player a reason to choose Marowak because its stats really don't make you want to use this thing. Onix is next. Turn 1 it goes for Screech. I use Bone Club, which misses. Of course it does. Then Onix chooses Bide, which is not good. Bone Club hits, doing roughly 1/3, and I was a little bit worried here. If I use Ember, I could do less damage and then take less from Bide in recoil, but I decided to go for another Bone Club and just pray. Luckily, this one misses as well, so Bide doesn't knock out Marowak on the next turn, but then I miss, and Onix goes for Bide again, accumulating more damage from my next Bone Club. Luckily for me though, I don't miss the follow-up. I do damage, but Onix just barely survives on a sliver of health. Are you kidding me? It's gonna knock me out with Bide, isn't it? No, it's not. It's going to be a 3-turn Bide, giving me one more turn to attack and Onix goes down. By the way, you will have spotted my mistake there. I should have knocked it out using Ember so that I was using a move with 100% accuracy. I definitely didn't need the increased damage from Bone Club to get the knockout. So in the end, I didn't need to play safe. With Brock's Badge, I get a 12.5% boost to my attack stat, and that puts it a full 10 points ahead of my special stat. And that's really the problem with Marowak in Generation 1. It has a bunch of special moves, but it can't really use any of them for coverage since its special is just so bad compared to its attack. And that is true for Alolan Marowak, which makes its same type attack bonus fire type moves a big disappointment. Also, like a lot of other Generation 1 fire types, it does not have access to Flamethrower, the best fire type move in the game. It also doesn't get access to Fire Spin, which Game Freak thought was the best fire type move in the game. But Fire Blast might be useful since it does get the same type attack bonus and 85% accuracy is at least usable. Unless it's Bone Club, I hate using this move in the early game. It is so inaccurate and terrible. At least on Route 3 there's a bunch of bug types, so I can still use Ember here. But as I defeat this bug catcher's Pokemon, I want you to look at my PP. Right now I am out of Bone Club and I only have 2 more uses of Ember. Also, Alolan Marowak has reached level 13, so it's also learned Tail Whip. There is only one more mandatory trainer on this route and he has 2 bug type Pokemon, so I thought that Ember was going to be good enough to one-shot both of his Pokemon so that I could make it to the Pokemon Center just outside of Mount Moon. I was right against the Caterpie, which goes down to 1 hit from Ember, but then the Metapod just barely survives. Its only move is Harden, so it can't do any damage to Marowak, and in Generation 1, enemy Pokemon do not have PP, so it will never use Struggle. The only way that this battle can end at the current time is me spamming out all of my uses of Tail Whip and then using Struggle to knock out the Metapod. If this was a follow-up playthrough, I would have restarted the entire run now because the time it's going to take to get rid of Tail Whip is significant. I used the move for the first time at 4 minutes and 22 seconds on the clock, and it takes me until 5 minutes and 1 second to use Struggle for the first time, which knocks out the Metapod. So that was a 39-second time loss because of my bad PP management. And all of this happened because I tried to skip the Pokemon Center heal in Pewter City to save a little bit of time. Just so you're aware, it costs roughly 5 seconds of time to heal in a Pokemon Center, plus the walk time to get to that Pokemon Center, so this was obviously not a good trade. Inside Mount Moon, I could pick up the Water Gun TM for coverage, but I don't think it's going to be useful with Marowak. Plus, I don't really want to do that much extra training in this section of the game if I can avoid it. These trainers are pretty inefficient for experience yields, and I would prefer to train once I arrive in Cerulean City if possible. The downside to doing things that way is that if I arrive in Cerulean City and I don't have enough experience to fight Misty with all of the trainers there, then I will have to go to Vermilion City to continue my training. While in Mount Moon, I did take the time to pick up the Mega Punch TM so that I have a useful normal type move. But frustratingly, this physical move also has 85% accuracy. I'm gonna have to wait for Dig in order to get a 100% accurate physical move. Bone Club is quite good though against the poison types at the end of the cave, so both the Super Nerd and Jesse and James don't cause any issues. It makes absolutely no sense to fight Misty right now with 25 speed, so I'm gonna go up against the Rival instead. He leads with Spearow, and it, as well as Rattata and Eevee, all outspeed Marowak, which feels really bad. Luckily Thankfully I have special damage, so it doesn't matter if the Spearow goes for Growl early on when I'm taking time to knock out his Pokemon. Now, here's the thing. This fight might be slow, but it doesn't matter once the Spearow goes down because it's the only Pokemon that has a damage dealing move that can affect ghost types. This fact is a major factor in why training in Mount Moon just doesn't make sense with Alolan Marowak. Typically I add in some training there if I want to level up slightly more for the rival and get over a damage rounding threshold at level 18, but my typing makes this battle a non-issue. On Route 24 I teach Marowak Nightshade in the place of Tail Whip. This move can be useful, especially if I have to ping down enemy Pokemon with something that's 100% accurate. Also in Generation 1 it does hit normal type Pokemon, and having more PP that deals damage is better at this point in the run, but I don't think that this move is going to have a large impact on this playthrough. Now in Generation 1 Psychic type Pokemon are immune to Ghost type attacks, which makes no sense. However, the type immunity doesn't apply to Nightshade just like with the normal type, so I could hit Misty's Starmie with this move if I really wanted to. Sometimes Pokemon will pick up Seismic Toss on Route 25 before reaching Bill's house, and then use this move for fixed damage against her Pokemon when they don't have better options. Typically, Seismic Toss is a little bit more reliable than using something like Mega Punch, which is roughly equivalent in turns to Knockout, but it has the downside of bad accuracy. For Alolan Marowak, while Nightshade could be an option, I don't think it's gonna work out, since right now my speed stat is 32 and Misty's Staryu has 38. If it's moving first and attacking with Water Gun, and then Starmie will attack 3 times in a row, I think it's unlikely that my fire type survives the battle. So it was inevitable, I'm heading south to Vermilion City to continue my training. Even if I had fought trainers in Mount Moon, I would be doing this. After defeating Rocket Man, I get the Dig TM and teach this in the place of Bone Club. Good riddance. I'm going to mention here that every time I used Dig during this playthrough, I was a little bit shocked at how little damage it was doing. This is just because Marowak is not a ground type Pokemon, and I constantly had to remind myself of this, so Dig is typically not the best move to be going for in these runs, especially since it takes 2 turns. On the SSN, I decided to pick up the Rest TM, since when fighting Lance, this move can be very useful, especially with fire types. His Gyarados at the beginning of the battle is brutal with its Hydro Pump, and then healing immediately after it before the remaining team members can be a huge advantage. But to get access to Rest, I have to fight this Sailor, who has a Staryu which is very similar to Misty's. It's the same level and all enemy Pokemon have the exact same stats because their IVs are identical. It's moving first, it uses Water Gun, does a lot of damage, I choose Dig, it doesn't do enough to knock it out in 1 turn, and then I misclick here choosing Mega Punch instead of Nightshade, which would have knocked it out. Unfortunately, Mega Punch misses. As a result, Staryu attacks again with Water Gun and Marowak goes down. I'm taking my first reset here to a random Sailor on the SSN, it feels bad, but I come back, get my revenge, and then pick up the Rest TM. After that I grab the Body Slam TM, which is a great replacement for Mega Punch. Now all of my moves are 100% accurate. Alolan Marowak's typing is once again incredible against the rival on the SSN. The only Pokemon here that can hit me is the Spearow with its Peck. Everything else has normal moves, and I'm one-shotting most of these Pokemon, with the exception of Sandshrew, which takes 2 hits to knock out. I think the Eevee also would have survived, but in this case I get a critical hit, so it goes down in 1 turn anyway. With the rival defeated, I have an unfortunate speed stat, 37. So I'm going to need to do a little bit more training to get to level 25 before I face Misty. This Fisher with 2 Goldeen and 1 Tentacool is a good option. None of his Pokemon have water type moves, and they give decent experience yields. That gets me to 25, where I teach Marowak Shadow Bone in the place of Nightshade. This move has 85 base power, so after the same type attack bonus, its effective power is 127.5. It also has a secondary effect, which is a chance of lowering the enemy's defense, and in Generation 1 this is a 33% chance, which mirrors the other stat lowering moves like Psychic, Aurora Beam, or Acid. At level 25 I have exactly 38 speed, and I am going to go back to fight Misty now, even though this is just a speed tie with a Staryu. But with a little bit of luck, I think I'll be able to pull through with a win. Staryu is first. I win the speed tie with Shadow Bone, and I one-shot with a critical hit. That's the luck I was looking for. Starmie is next. I'm not going to use Shadow Bone here. Remember that the Starmie is a Psychic type, and Shadow Bone will not do any damage to it. It outspeeds, goes for Water Gun, gets a critical hit, and does way more than half to Marowak. Luckily, my attack with Body Slam also crits, but it doesn't paralyze, leaving the Staryu on orange health, which is 1 turn away from getting knocked out. Because Misty has good AI, she's always going to be choosing Water Gun or Bubble Beam, unless she replaces one of these moves and uses an X-Defend on Starmie. And guess what happens? She X-Defends the Starmie, giving me time to use Body Slam and knock out her ace. So, my Fire type takes care of the Water type specialist on its first attempt. Okay, we're going to go immediately south to Vermilion City and fight Lieutenant Surge. This is going to be easy. He's got 3 normal type moves. He could attack with Thunderbolt, but I don't really care. I'm going to survive at least 1 hit, and I was anticipating that Dig would one-shot the electric type, but no, it survives on a sliver of health. This is because I don't have the same type attack bonus. However, Surge has no idea what he's doing. He just uses Mega Punch and then I finish his Pokemon with Ember. Okay, that's it for Surge's cameo in this video. The Wrapping Lass seems like she'd be easy because we have Ember, but no, Shadow Bone is going to do more damage and it'll be more reliable, so that's my choice. By the way, Wrap cannot hit Ghost-type Pokemon, so while she couldn't defeat me with her typical Stun Spore Wrap strategy, Wrap still does play its animation whenever used against a Ghost-type Pokemon, and it plays the animation the number of times Wrap would have affected the Pokemon, which wastes so much time, especially if you get paralyzed. So one-shotting the Grass-type Pokemon is still paramount. The Cubone inside of Rock Tunnel is a little bit annoying because I have to 2-shot, and it does have Bone Club, which is super effective. But luckily the Slowpoke in the cave do not have any Water-type moves, and while Confusion is doing okay damage, it's not enough to make me worried. The self-destructing Hiker is terrible against Ghost-type Pokemon because if he self-destructs, it does no damage. As a Fire type, I think it's safest to go into the Rocket Hideout and pick up an extra rare candy during this run. You can skip this with most really strong Pokemon, but for a Fire type, which will struggle in the late game against Lorelei and Lance, I think that this is the safer way to play. Oh, also the champion has Sandslash, and I anticipate it's going to be pretty scary. For vitamins in the department store, I purchased myself 2 Carbos to increase Marowak's speed stat. I also forgot to grab Rock Slide, so I backtracked to the department store and picked it up a little bit later. Having access to a rock move in combination with a ground move in Generation 1 gives me neutral coverage against every Pokemon. And now I have a purely physical set: Shadow Bone, Rock Slide, Dig, and Body Slam. Rock Slide for the rival's Fearow. It's not really good against Ghost types since the only move it's ever going to use is Mirror Move. Dig one-shots the Magnemite, Shadow Bone takes care of Shelder as well as Sandshrew, and then Dig followed by Body Slam takes care of the Eevee. I have enough speed to move first against all of the Ghastly in Pokemon Tower, and Dig is able to one-shot them, although I should be going for Shadow Bone here since it would take 1 less turn. As I defeat Jesse and James, I have to start thinking about what's next. Do I want to go to the Safari Zone, do some training on Cycling Road, or do I want to go into Sylph? And I think the latter of these 2 options is the better choice, because in Sylph I can pick up the TM for Swords Dance. Because of the type coverage I already mentioned, getting rid of Body Slam makes the most sense now. Another thing I should mention is that I could potentially teach Earthquake in the place of Dig right now, but that's not the best play I think, because holding onto Dig has 2 utilities. Number 1, I can use it to escape locations without having to buy escape ropes, but I can also use it for some tactical advantages against Lorelei later on, so I'll be holding on to it for now. With Shadow Bone, I have a different move that I can use for go-to damage, so the turn disadvantage from Dig is not the worst thing in the world. Using Dig in Generation 1 takes you back to the last Pokemon Center, which brings me to Celadon City, and that's perfect. I might as well go and fight Erika now. She leads with Tangela, which is basically an invitation for you to use setup moves. I'm going to use Swords Dance here, and I thought after 1 turn of setup I would have enough to one-shot all of her Pokemon, but I get a critical hit on the Tangela so it survives. This is fine, because both the Weepinbell and the Gloom after it go down in 1 hit, and the Tangela was never a threat. By the way, even if I had Fire-type moves during this fight and I didn't have Swords Dance, I still think that using physical moves would be the better option against Erika, and that's just because her Pokemon have decent special stats. Next I head south on Cycling Road towards the Safari Zone. I chose to fight 3 optional trainers here: the Grimy Biker, the Wheezing Biker, as well as the Biker Boss. As a Fire type with average at best stats, I don't think that skipping training in the mid-game is the best solution, but I do have Swords Dance and that'll make up for Marowak's statistical shortcomings. And the setup move is just going to get even better once I beat Koga and get access to the Speed Badge boost. So once I complete exploring the Safari Zone, I head into his gym. I invest a little bit of time fighting both of the Tamers for some additional experience, and then at level 39, I take on Koga. I'm faster than all 3 of his Venonats, and I'm going to be able to use Swords Dance at least once, since his first Venonat's not going to be able to knock me out with Psychic. Although it does get a critical hit, luckily not dropping my special. Because of how much damage it dealt, I went on the offensive with Rock Slide, finishing it off, as well as the other 2 Venonats moving on to the Venomoth. I am a bit worried though that this is going to do too much damage with its Psychic and Marowak won't survive. After all, Koga's Ace is a very high level and it outspeeds. It uses Psychic and Marowak hangs on 17 hit points. Okay, so after 1 Swords Dance, will Rock Slide do enough damage? Yes, it does. With the Soul Badge, I now have a 12.5% boost to my speed stat, and every time I use Swords Dance, this will compound, further increasing my speed. I can also use Surf outside of battle, so I'm going to head south to Cinnabar Island. On my way, I fight Psyche the Fisher for a little bit of additional experience, bringing Marowak up to level 41. This is not the perfect level to go into Cinnabar Mansion with, since I can run into wild encounters. If I use some rare candies now, I could prevent all of them, but I want to hold off on using rare candies until the latest possible moment in this first playthrough. Hopefully during my follow-up playthrough I can move the rare candies a little bit earlier and prevent some lost time here. Well, that's the theory, because in practice I run into no wild encounters during this first playthrough, so it's just the same as if I had used the rare candies. I dig out of the mansion, and now I'm ready to face Blaine. Okay, this fight's a little bit weird. I am a ghost type, so he cannot hit me with his physical moves. Instead, he can only damage me with fire type moves, which I resist because of my fire typing. The Ninetales is pretty incompetent, just trying things like Tail Whip at the beginning of the battle, and then I finish it with a super effective dig. I went for only a single turn of Swords Dance here because I didn't think I needed to outspeed all of his Pokemon, and I thought this would give me enough damage. But then, after knocking out his Rapidash, the Arcanine gets a critical hit with Flamethrower, and it does so much damage. Also, the Arcanine is pretty bulky, so it survives my hit from Dig, and then it goes for Reflect. Okay, that didn't do really anything, but it survives another Dig as a result, goes for Fire Blast, and knocks out Marowak. So my second reset is against Blaine. Are you kidding me? This guy always gives resets when I least expect them, which is exclusive to Yellow version because in Red and Blue he is absolutely terrible. The solution for this is so obvious, just set up Swords Dance twice. I get hit by Confuse Ray, then I crit the Ninetales, which bypasses my stat alterations, doing less damage, allowing his lead to survive, but that just gives me more time for Confusion to wear off, and then I one-shot the Rapidash as well as the Arcanine. Although the fight is still pretty close because I did tank another Flamethrower, leaving Marowak on orange health. With the Volcano Badge, I now have a boost to my special, and that completes my set of badge boosts. So whenever I use Swords Dance, it will correctly recalculate my attack stat and badge boost my defense, speed, and special. And I had specifically planned to have this as an advantage against the rival in Sylph. I set up on the Sand Slash, risking Sand Attack, although it just goes for Slash and Swift. I get to +4, and then I one-shot with Shadow Bone. Rock Slide takes care of the Cloyster, although Shadow Bone probably would have got the job done. Dig one-shots Magneton. I continue using it against the Kadabra. I leveled up right before it, losing my speed boost, which is unfortunate, but it doesn't end up mattering. Confusion does such little damage, and Flareon's a one-shot with Dig. Giovanni is easy, this time around. The next fight against him is going to be quite difficult since he has 4 Pokemon that know Earthquake, and his Dugtrio is notoriously fast. Now, I make what I consider to be a mistake next. I teach Earthquake in the place of Dig, which doesn't make sense at this point in the game. I need Dig to escape Sabrina's gym more quickly, and teaching Earthquake now before Lorelei makes very little sense. Why would have I saved Dig for this long? I could have just bought escape ropes and then taught Earthquake earlier if I wanted to play things this way. As soon as I did it, I thought about resetting, but that would take me back before Rival 5, and I decided against that, instead seeing if Swords Dance would allow me to play things out. Alolan Marowak doesn't have a good matchup against Sabrina, which is truly ironic. It's slower than all 3 of her Pokemon, so Abra has a chance for Flash right away. I then try to set up Swords Dance on the Kadabra. It goes for X-Defend, followed by Recover, and I take it out with Earthquake. But then Alakazam comes in, uses Psychic, gets a critical hit, and Marowak faints. Luckily for me, Sabrina isn't very good in Yellow. Eventually I'm going to set up with Swords Dance and knock out her team members when when she makes bad choices. And that happens right away, despite the fact I had my accuracy lowered by 3 stages. Luckily for me, her Alakazam just sits there and does nothing. Okay, it's time to face the second major hurdle for fire types in Pokemon Yellow. The first one's Misty. She's usually not that bad, but Giovanni can be devastating. One tactic I have against him is that I can use Mimic to steal Double Team from the Persian, set up this move, and then sweep his team. It also compounds badge boosts in all of your stats, which is a huge advantage. That said, my current set is great and I don't want to drop any of my moves for Mimic, so I'm going to try to fight him as is and just hope that I can do it at level 46. If not, I'm going to try rare candies before resorting to Mimic. Dugtrio is first. It has 133 speed, and right now 4 of Giovanni's Pokemon are faster than Marowak. I definitely need speed boosts to pull this off. Turn 1, his lead goes for Earthquake, doing more than half, and I set up with Swords Dance, boosting my speed so that I'm faster than the Nidoqueen, but still Persian and Nidoking are faster, although the Persian can't do any damage to me because I'm a Ghost type. So really, I should knock out the Dugtrio as fast as possible and then set up against his second Pokemon. But I made a mistake here. I should have gone to +6, but I only go to +4, thinking I didn't need to waste additional time with one more turn of setup. But it didn't really matter anyway, because I lose my badge boost before the Nidoking due to where I level up in the fight, and as a result it can go for Earthquake and finish Marowak. Okay, the mid-battle level up means that I need to use rare candies now. I'm starting at level 46, so I'm going to go up over as many damage rounding thresholds I can without using all of my rare candies. I want to keep some for the Elite Four so that I can optimize my experience to maintain badge boosts during those fights. I level to 53 and then I try again. I still didn't quite understand how to play this fight because I'm going for Swords Dance against the Dugtrio. It uses Dig anyway, so it's good that I went for Swords Dance here, boosting my defense stat. I squeeze in one more Swords Dance and then I knock it out. I should have completed my setup on Persian, but I make the mistake again, knocking it out. But I can one-hit both the Nidoqueen and the Nidoking. But doubt started to set in when the Rhydon came out. Is +4 really enough? Yes, it is. Earthquake gets the one-shot. The rival before the Elite Four is really easy for Alolan Marowak. The Sandslash's only damage-dealing move that it can hit me with is Poison Sting, and it no longer has Sand Attack. I can set up here as much as I want. I should have gone to +6 just to be safe, but I went to +4, and this ends up being enough to one-shot all of his team members, so I saved a little bit of time, even though it was slightly risky for a first run. I have one more decision to make about my training during this run. Do I want to grind a little bit during Victory Road? I'm picking up the rare candy, but I don't think fighting trainers is going to be necessary. I still have rare candies left over because I didn't use all of them to fight Giovanni, and I'm anticipating that Swords Dance is going to carry Marowak through the league. But Lorelei is first, and she is a significant threat when you're using a fire-type Pokemon. Dugong is her lead, and it likes to go for Bubble Beam, but on turn 2 it can go for Rest, although the chances are much lower than they would be if I was using a Pokemon like Nidoking. This is why Dig can be really good against her. You dodge Bubble Beam on turn 1, do damage, and then she uses Rest, giving you time to set up with Swords Dance. But in this case, I set up with Swords Dance on turn 1, tanked a Bubble Beam, and then I decided to try to sweep. Swords Dance one-shots Dugong, Cloyster comes in, and it's defensive enough to survive a single hit. It retaliates with Clamp and finishes Marowak. Okay, so I have to play this fight with no Dig. It's unfortunate, but there is a way to do it. Swords Dance turn 1, which improves my special so I take less damage from Bubble Beam. Then Shadow Bone on turn 2, which does not knock out the Dugong. This allows it to use Rest, and then I can complete my setup with Swords Dance and sweep her team members. I misplay a little bit using Rock Slide when I should be going for Shadow Bone, especially on the Dugong. I'm not sure if that would have been the right choice for Cloyster. I'll review that damage range later. But in the end, it's enough, and I make it through Lorelei after only one reset, which is pretty good for a fire type. Okay, cue silly music. It's time for this guy, the man, the myth, the legend. He leads with Onyx. It's terrible, giving me time to set up with Swords Dance, and then I sweep his team. Against Agatha, I want to set up on her first Gengar to hopefully get outspeeds on the remainder of her team members. Also, I want to have enough damage to ensure that I one-shot everything, which isn't too hard since Shadow Bone is super effective against her ghosts, Rock Slide takes care of Golbat, and I have Earthquake for Arbok. The problem here is as I set up with Swords Dance, Confuse Ray becomes more and more scary. But unlike other Pokemon that set up against the Gengar, I don't have to worry about Lick since it can't inflict paralysis on a Ghost-type Pokemon. The Gengar, luckily for me, does not choose Confuse Ray. Instead, it's going for things like Mega Drain, which is hilarious. Anyways, I get set up and then I just sweep her entire team. Another really easy battle for Alolan Marowak. But now we have two brutal fights. First is Lance, and his lead is Gyarados. It has Hydro Pump, he has good AI, and so he's always going to choose the water type move. The solution for a lot of fire types is just waiting until Hydro Pump misses. But after one turn of Swords Dance, I am able to survive the hit, although with only 2 hit points. And now I need to sweep his team with +2, which isn't going to be possible since the Aerodactyl will attack me with either Wing Attack or Fly. I use my remaining 4 rare candies, boosting Marowak up to level 62 before trying this again. And then immediately Hydro Pump misses, giving me the knockout on the Gyarados, and from here I was very confident against Lance. Shadow Bone one-shots both Dragonairs. I don't really care about the Aerodactyl unless it critical hits, and in this case it does with its most powerful move, Fly, but it still does less than half to Marowak. Rock Slide one-shots, and I move on to the Dragonite. Unfortunately for me, with only +2, I'm not able to take care of Lance's ace in only 1 hit. He chooses a Hyper Potion, I attack again, bringing his Dragonite back down to red health, then it goes for Thunder, and I was worried here that it would do enough damage to knock out Marowak because I have low special, but it doesn't hit because Thunder has bad accuracy. I use Shadow Bone and Dragonite goes down. Now, time to face the champion. This Sandslash has the potential to be a slasher movie villain against Alolan Marowak. My flaming ghost type Pokemon is going to be a sorority girl running around trying to escape this merciless killer, because after one turn of Swords Dance, Sandslash goes for Earthquake, and look at how much damage it does, more than half. Now, with +2, using Shadow Bone, my most effective move, I am not able to knock out the Sandslash, and then it takes care of me on the next turn. Okay, this is going to be brutal just like I was expecting. Maybe special damage will give me a better way to manage the Sandslash. I teach Fire Blast in the place of Rock Slide and try again. But no, Fire Blast does roughly the same amount of damage, and without setup, Earthquake can do even more. In this case, it gets a critical hit and Marowak goes down in 1 turn. So what about Swords Dance followed by Fire Blast so that I have a special boost? And the answer is no, this doesn't one-shot the Sandslash. It doesn't even come close. I would have to level up to maybe 68 in order for that to work. And even for a follow-up playthrough, that seems impractical. Okay, Marowak has fantastic coverage, so what about Ice Beam? Well, it's going to do more damage when compared with Fire Blast, but still not enough to one-shot the Sandslash. And I'd probably need level 65 in order to pull that off. Also, another critical hit Earthquake, are you kidding me? One way to win here is with Ice Beam, triggering a full restore on the Sandslash and then rolling again for a freeze or a critical hit. But I don't get it in this case, although I do knock out the Sandslash, moving on to the Alakazam for the first time. It goes for Psybeam, and I survive the hit, and Earthquake gets a crit, knocking the Psychic type out. I don't think I would have without that. Now I move on to Executor, and it is hilarious. It has Barrage, Hypnosis, Stomp, and Leech Seed. The only way it can deal damage to a Ghost Fire-type Pokemon would be using Leech Seed, but it views the Grass-type move as not very effective, so it's never going to pick it, instead randomizing between Barrage, Hypnosis, and Stomp. That gives me all the time I need to set up Swords Dance, and then finish the Executor with slower moves like Ice Beam and Earthquake. From there, this should be an easy sweep. Earthquake one-shots Magneton, I have Shadow Bone for the Cloyster, but no, I get a critical hit so that it doesn't knock it out. Cloyster uses Clamp and Marowak faints. Okay, I have to face the Sandslash again. But I think two-shotting with Ice Beam is probably my best bet, moving on to the Alakazam and trying to survive Psybeam. It could also miss a Kinesis, and that's what happens here, twice in a row. I move on to the Executor with higher health, and this is gonna be it. I sweep from there, one-shotting the Cloyster, this time using Shadow Bone, and Earthquake finishes the Flareon. With Alolan Marowak, I get a first playthrough time of 52 minutes and 8 seconds. With 11 resets, 0 blackouts at level 64, with a game time of 3 hours and 7 minutes. For a Ghost-type Pokemon that gets access to Swords Dance and has fantastic coverage, this is not a good result even in a first playthrough. But I'm definitely not feeling hopeless about Alolan Marowak. This thing does have significant potential for a follow-up playthrough. The first thing to go through is Brock, and the damage ranges here for Alolan Marowak on minimum battles are just really bad. Bone Club does 28 to 34% damage to the Geodude, and 19 to 25% damage damage to the Onix. And because of Bone Club's awful accuracy, the number of turns it takes me to knock out each of these Pokemon on minimum battles is very high. This is definitely possible with Alolan Marowak, but for me, it didn't seem like the fun thing to do. So instead, I decided to continue fighting 3 optional bug catchers in order to fight Brock at level 9. This gives me a 66.8% chance to 3-shot the Geodude and a 78.1% chance to 4-shot the Onix. This is the damage range that really matters because we want to minimize bide potential. And a 4-hit on the Onix is still not that good. There is the risk here that the Onix just goes for bide and still wins, but it's a lot less likely than it would be if I didn't do the early game training. And the additional early game experience does synergize a little bit towards my goal of beating Misty. Although it's not the most efficient way to get that experience, Minimum Battles Brock definitely would be the fastest way to play this early game. I apologize if you think I should have played it that way, I just couldn't stomach it. Let's talk about fighting Misty with Alolan Marowak before going to the SSN, so that you can see why this is just not a good choice. Going through the next section of the game on Minimum Battles gets Marowak here at level 21. It has a 74.4% chance to 2-shot the Staryu, which it underspeeds. After taking hits from 2 water guns, each which will deal between 31 and 37% damage, there is no way for me to knock out the Starmie in time. Unless Marowak gets 2 critical hits and Misty's Starmie both gets an X defend and a Gen 1 miss. If I had access to a move like Confuse Ray, there would be the potential for a way to squeeze through this battle with a little bit of luck. There is also potentially the option of finding a way to get paralyzed in the early game, maybe fighting a Wild Oddish, and then coming here, triggering the invulnerability glitch with Dig, and then defeating Misty that way. But I have chosen to avoid using that glitch intentionally because a lot of you didn't like when I did it with Machop. That means the solution has to be going to the SSN first and then backtracking to Misty after training more. I'm not going to pick up Rest here because I don't think it's useful for Alolan Marowak. Swords Dance is enough for the late game. I am going to get Body Slam though, fight the Gentleman, defeat the Rival, and then take on the Fisher as well as this Gentleman with 2 Growlithe. This way I can get enough experience to level up to 25 and speed tie Misty's Staryu. I considered using 1 rare candy here to get to level 26, but in the end I decided to use them later into the playthrough since the speed tie here is enough. To increase my odds of success against Misty, I'm using Body Slam on turn 1 against the Starmie to hopefully paralyze it. Then I can move first and knock it out. And this happens right away, so Alolan Marowak has no resets to Misty in today's runs. By the way, just so you know how scary the Starmie should have been, Bubble Beam does between 59 and 71% damage to a level 25 Alolan Marowak. Now I'm going to skip a bunch of the game that I played identically to my first playthrough. There's no reason to go through it again. Against Koga, I want to go through damage ranges here because they're a little bit sketchy. After 1 turn of Swords Dance, I can one-shot the Venonats using Shadow Bone, and then one-shot the Venomoth with Rock Slide. But this isn't consistent. I have a guarantee on the first Venonat, 97.8% chance on the second one, and 94.1% chance on the third. But then against Venomoth, I only have a 63.3% chance. And his ace with Psychic does between 46 and 54% damage, which isn't a problem because the first Venonat only does between 19 and 23% damage with its Psychic. The only issue is if the first Venonat drops my special with Psychic, or if one of Koga's Pokemon gets a critical hit. Unfortunately for me today, he gets the special drop on turn 1 with Venonat, and because of that I take my first reset here. But I'm able to make it by him on my second attempt. By the way, while editing, Exceptional caught the fact that I am using Rock Slide on the Venonats. This is just a mistake. Shadow Bone is just more consistent. Now, this is where I start changing things up from my first run. Like I was saying before, using rare candies prior to Pokemon Mansion has a big advantage because then I can avoid wild encounters. So I'm going to do that here, boosting Alolan Marowak up to level 50 before taking on Blaine. At the higher level, I only need to use 1 turn of Swords Dance to have one-shots on all of his Fire-type Pokemon when using Dig. And I'm keeping this move specifically for Lorelei this time. I'm not going to be teaching Earthquake too early. Using the candies prior to Blaine also helps speed up Rival 5 and reduce risk, because I only need to use Swords Dance once to get one-shots on all of his Pokemon. I'm also going to outspeed the Kadabra this time around so that it can't mess me up with confusion. Unfortunately, because of low base speed, I just need to luck my way through Sabrina. There's no way to play this consistently. And I get lucky, no resets in this run. Prior to fighting Giovanni, to ensure that I don't level up during the fight, I use 1 rare candy, boosting Alolan Marowak to 54. The correct way to play this fight is Shadow Bone on turn 1, knock out the the Dugtrio and then set up twice on the Persian. +4 is enough to one-shot the Rhydon using Dig, and increasing to +6 does not improve your odds. Also, remember that Earthquake does not hit Pokemon when they're underground in Generation 1, so using Dig here is safe even against Earthquake users. Even though I took a substandard approach to this fight, I didn't even set up to +4. I still just have a miracle and luck my way through, knocking out the Rhydon in 2 hits. Okay, Dig for Lorelei. This isn't a guarantee because the Dugong can still choose Bubble Beam, and it gets a critical hit on my first attempt, one-shotting Marowak. But in the second fight, it does choose to go for rest, and then I can set up for free and sweep her team members. The fight ended up being a little bit scary because I did get a critical hit against the Cloyster, allowing it to survive, but luckily for me, it just missed Clamp. 4 Lance, 1 Swords Dance on turn 1, miss Hydro Pump, and then one-shot with Rock Slide. At level 59, the damage range with 1 turn of Swords Dance is 101% damage to 119% damage. I also want to mention that using Shadow Bone against the Aerodactyl is slightly better than using Rock Slide just because of the increased accuracy. Shadow Bone has a 95.2% chance to one-shot, whereas Rock Slide only has a 90% chance because it has a 10% chance to miss. If I choose to not set up one more time with Swords Dance during the fight with Lance, I have to 2-shot the Dragonite, but this isn't the worst thing in the world since my health is usually pretty good by the time I get there. I took 1 reset here because of Hydro Pump, but that's a really good result. So now, what's my solution for the champion and his Sandslash? Well, I'm gonna make Zealous Pawn proud today because we're using Shadow Bone, Fissure, Earthquake, and Swords Dance. Fissure allows me to one-shot the Sandslash, avoiding its Earthquakes. If I miss, I just reset right away because I don't want to try and fight the Alakazam and then get into a bad position, getting knocked out later into the fight. Eventually, I'm going to knock out the Sandslash, then I'm going to 2-shot the Alakazam using Earthquake. This can sometimes go wrong, which is annoying, but by the time I knock out the Alakazam, the entire fight is easy, because as we went through before, the Executor is incompetent. This allows me to set up with Swords Dance and sweep his team. And while I did have a lot of resets here, my time is still significantly better than it was in the first run. In my second run with Alolan Marowak, I get a time of 44 minutes and 26 seconds, with 10 resets, 0 blackouts, at level 62, with a game time of 2 hours and 46 minutes. I like to do battles against the Hidden Oak battle in Pokemon Yellow at the very end of the videos. I don't know why, but I fought the Charizard team by mistake, which makes this so much easier for Marowak. In my first fight, I realized that I'm losing my badge boosts in the middle of the battle due to where my level was after the champion. But since I'm leveling up right before Charizard comes in, I can just save Swords Dances, use one of them prior to the Gyarados, and then outspeed it in one shot. But if I fight the Blastoise team, it seems like this is not going to be quite as easy. Although that's not really true because the Blastoise has Withdraw, so I wait for it to use this water type move, set up Swords Dance, outspeed the Gyarados, and win. You're probably noticing that it isn't quite that simple because after 1 Withdraw, I am not able to one-shot the Blastoise using Shadow Bone. I could have used Fissure here for the 1-hit, however, I can also survive the Hydro Pump. In this case, Marowak pulls through with 1 hit point. And yeah, that's enough to knock out the Blastoise and the following Gyarados. Now, let's rank Alolan Marowak in the tier list. We are starting to have an overcrowding problem with this graphic, and we haven't yet coded a way around this. I just said we would do it later, and I guess later is now. We should probably fix this. Anyways, for the sake of clarity, let's remove all of the original 151 Pokemon and look at only backports. Right now in existence, there are 1,025 Pokemon, so if we subtract out the original 151, this gives us 874 backports to complete. But if we also include the 57 regional variants in existence, then this number gets bumped up to 931. I am really going to have to solve the overcrowding issue. With its performance today, Alolan Marowak is joining the bulk of backports in the A tier. It's near the end of this list. It underperformed Annihilape and Jirachi, and just slightly outperformed Toxicroak. Unfortunately, it wasn't able to reach the peak performance of a ghost type like Delmise, another Pokemon that was introduced in Generation 7. I played it earlier in the year. Go and check out that video if you're curious why it's so good. I've got a lot of really fun videos planned for this Halloween season, so I hope you're going to enjoy this month. And expect more frequent releases for me over the next 3 months, especially near the end of November and then all throughout December. Because once again, daily December is on. And really, it's made possible by people like you who support me over on Patreon or through YouTube memberships. Thank you so much. It means the world to me. Now, if you've made it this far, you're incredible. I'll see you in my next video.